Today, we're going to look at a completely new way to think about ownership in our digital lives. It's all built around this one really powerful idea. What if everything, and I mean everything, you created online came with its own permanent, unforgeable receipt? Let's get into it. I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. You write a piece of code, you design something cool, you label a piece of data that helps train an AI. How do you prove that was you, that you did it, and when you did it? It's a massive problem, and it's left so many people without the credit or the compensation they deserve. But what if we could flip that on its head? What if every one of those actions, whether it feels big or small, generated its own kind of digital receipt? You know, one that couldn't be faked, couldn't be messed with, and would forever connect that work back to you. Well, that's exactly the idea we're going to unpack today. So what is it that makes this digital receipt so special? Well, it's way more than just a simple record. It's actually the cornerstone for a whole new way of doing things, an economy built on ownership that you can actually verify. Okay, so the official name for this is a contribution fingerprint, or just CF for short. And the absolute best way to think about it is like a receipt that also has its whole history attached, its provenance. As the source material puts it, it's the very first brick. Literally everything else is built on top of this one concept. So here's where the power really comes from. A contribution fingerprint permanently locks four crucial things together. First, what was actually done, the content itself. Second, who did it? That's your unique digital ID. Third, when it happened, a timestamp that can't be changed. And finally, and this is so important, why anyone should trust it, the verifiable evidence that proves it's legit. All right, so we've got this superpowered receipt, but what is it actually recording? Let's get into the nitty-gritty and break down the basic building blocks of what this system even considers a contribution. So the system looks at the world in terms of atomic contributions. Think of these as the smallest, most fundamental actions you can take and that you can record. And it turns out there are really only three types. And here they are. It's actually pretty straightforward. First up, you've got the sample. This is just the original thing, the raw data, like a medical scan or a legal contract. Then you have a label. This is when someone comes along and adds some context, like a diagnosis for that scan. And finally, you have validation. This is where someone else, maybe another expert, comes in to review that work and confirm if it's accurate. Each one is a separate, recordable event. So we have these basic actions. How do you actually take one of them and turn it into one of these permanent, trustworthy digital records? Well, the process for creating one is incredibly thorough, and for a very, very good reason. It all happens in 6 steps. First, you submit your work. Then it gets pre-scanned automatically to make sure everything's in order. After that, a formal record is created. Now, here's the key part. You bind your identity to it by signing it with your digital ID. Then it's anchored on a blockchain, which makes it permanent and unchangeable. And finally, it's published so it can be discovered. And I really want to highlight this point from the source because it's so important. The system never edits or deletes an old record. Ever. If you need to make a correction or an update, a whole new contribution fingerprint is created, and it just points back to the previous one. This way, the entire history is always preserved, mistakes and all. This idea has a name. It's called append-only. It works just like an old-school accounting ledger. You don't take an eraser to a mistake, right? You add a new line to correct it. This makes sure that the audit trail is always perfectly clean, and anyone can follow the entire story of a piece of data, from the moment it was created to right now. Okay, that's all the theory, but what does this actually look like when the rubber hits the road? Let's make this real with a story about a medical expert we'll call Dr. Lin. Dr. Lin's story is a perfect example of how these individual fingerprints can link together into this rich, verifiable chain of history for just one piece of valuable data. And, more importantly, how it gets her paid for her expertise. So the whole thing kicks off when a patient uploads a medical image from a diagnosis. That simple act of providing the initial sample data, boom, that instantly creates the very first contribution fingerprint in the chain, CF number 1. So next, Dr. Lin steps in. She uses her professional expertise, examines the image, and adds a label, in this case, her diagnosis. That action creates a second contribution fingerprint, CF number 2, and it's digitally linked directly back to that original patient's image. But we're not done yet. To make sure everything's accurate, other independent experts come in to review Dr. Lin's work. Each of their validations creates yet another fingerprint, and another, all of them linking back into this growing chain. What you end up with is this incredibly detailed, fully traceable history for that single medical image. Okay, so this is great. We have this beautiful, clear chain of events. We know exactly who did what and when. But how do Dr. Lin and the patient and the other reviewers, how do they actually make money from this? Well, that's where the royalty engine comes into play. Here's the whole journey, from start to finish. Step 1 is the contribution, where we create all those CFs we just talked about. In Step 2, acidification, lots of these verified contributions get bundled up into valuable data sets. Then comes Step 3, usage. An AI company pays to use this high-quality data, and every time they do, it's measured. And that brings us to the final step, royalty. And it all boils down to this simple, powerful formula. The system takes the revenue that the AI company paid, it looks at the exact usage data, and it cross-references the ownership recorded in all those contribution fingerprints. The result? A deterministic payout. That just means it's automatic, it's predictable, and you can audit it. Dr. Lin gets her fair share for her specific contribution every single time it's used. No questions asked. So let's zoom out and wrap this up. What's the big promise here? At the end of the day, it all comes back to that one core idea of provenance, of knowing without any doubt where something came from and who helped create it. What this all enables is just a game changer. You get clear authorship so credit never gets lost in the shuffle. Datasets can be traced all the way back to their source. Ownership is provable, it's real. And like we saw, it leads to fair, automatic royalty payments and a system where every single correction is transparent and accountable. And this is all built on a foundation of rules that never ever break. The system is always append-only, history is sacred, it's deterministic, which means the same inputs will always give you the same results. It's completely traceable, and it manages to do all of this with minimal disclosure, which means all the sensitive private data stays encrypted and secure. What we've looked at today isn't just a new feature. It's a fundamental change in how we can value and track digital work. It leaves us with this one really exciting question to think about. In a world where credit is never lost and ownership is perfectly clear, what amazing things will we create next?